While cleaning, I found my son's folder. Mom's house. Action plan. The last date was tomorrow. I said nothing. That night I made 3 phone calls.
Hi, it's Grace. Quick question. If you found a secret plan by your kids to sell your house, would you confront them? Tell me below. Today's story is a masterclass in why you should never underestimate your mother.
Phase 3, final talk. Date, tomorrow. That's what the paper said, written in my son's handwriting. The same handwriting I taught him when he was 6 years old, sitting at this very kitchen table, his small fingers gripping the pencil too tight while I guided his hand through each letter. I stood there in the guest room with the vacuum cleaner still running, humming into empty air like it didn't know the world had just tilted sideways. The blue folder had slipped behind the old desk. Greg's desk from high school, the one he said he wanted to keep for sentimental reasons when he moved out. I was just cleaning. That's all. Dusting the corners nobody sees, the way you do when you're 71 and the house feels too quiet and your hands need something to hold. The folder was labeled in black marker, Mom's house, action plan. Not mom, not family discussion. My house, action plan. I turned off the vacuum. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd heard in years. My name is Lorraine Barker. I've lived in this house since 1986, back when the neighborhood was all young families, and the oak tree in the front yard was barely taller than my husband, Earl. I raised my son here. I buried my husband from here. I paid off every cent of the mortgage with 35 years of night shifts at Shady Grove Nursing Home, emptying bedpans and holding hands and watching people take their last breaths while their families were too busy to visit. I know what it looks like when someone decides you're done being a person and starts treating you like a problem to solve. I just never thought I'd see that look in my own son's folder. I sat down on the edge of the bed, slowly, the way you do when your knees have opinions about sudden movements, and opened the folder properly. My reading glasses were downstairs, but I could see enough. More than enough. The first page was a timeline. Dates going back 8 months, each one with a note beside it. January 14th. Forgot to turn off stove. Document. I remembered that day. I was making soup. The phone rang. Greg, actually, asking if I could watch Becca the following weekend. By the time I got back to the kitchen, the soup had reduced to almost nothing, and the burner was still on low. I told Greg about it, laughing at myself. Getting old, I said. Happens to everyone. He wasn't laughing. He was documenting. February 3rd. Couldn't find car keys for 40 minutes. Possible early sign? Early sign. Those 2 words sat in my stomach like stones. I found those keys in my coat pocket, where I always put them when I come in from the cold. The coat was hanging in the closet instead of on the hook by the door because Tanya, Greg's wife, had moved it there during her last visit. It looks neater this way, Lorraine. She's always moving things, always improving me. March 28th. Seemed confused about appointment time. Arrived 30 minutes early. I wasn't confused. The doctor's office had called to reschedule, and I wrote down the new time wrong. I'm 71. I've been writing down appointments for 50 years. Sometimes you transpose a number. That's not dementia. That's being human. But here it was, in black ink. Possible early sign? I turned the page. Phase 1 was titled, Establish Pattern of Concern. There were bullet points. Document all incidents, forgetfulness, confusion, physical instability. Involve neighbors as informal observers. Schedule cognitive screening, present as routine. Phase 2. Limit independent decision-making. accompany to all medical appointments, suggest joint banking access for convenience, reduce solo driving opportunities. Phase 3. Final talk. Present options as choices. She's making herself. Emphasize safety, not finance. Have facility brochures ready. Contact realtor for preliminary assessment. The last date on the timeline was tomorrow. Tomorrow. They were coming tomorrow. At the bottom of the page, in Tanya's handwriting, I'd recognize those sharp, angled letters anywhere, was a note. Remember, stay calm, stay loving. If she cries, that actually helps our case. I read that line 3 times. Each time it meant the same thing. I kept turning pages. There was a printed email exchange between Greg and an attorney, someone named Howard Fitch, specializing in elder law and family transitions. Greg had written, "My mother is 71, widowed, living alone in a 4-bedroom house. She's showing early signs of cognitive decline, forgetfulness, confusion, poor judgment. We're concerned about her safety and want to discuss guardianship options if she resists transitioning to appropriate care." The attorney replied, "If she resists, we can petition for guardianship. Her medical records will be key. I recommend documenting everything and getting a formal cognitive assessment as soon as possible." A formal cognitive assessment. Last April, Tanya had called, her voice all honey and concern. "Lorraine, I scheduled a little checkup for you. Just routine stuff they do after 70. Everyone gets it. Greg would feel so much better knowing you're in perfect health." I went. Why wouldn't I? I sat in that office with a young doctor who asked me what year it was, who the president was, to count backward from 100 by 7s. He asked me to draw a clock showing 10 past 11. I drew the clock. My hand shook. It always shakes now, ever since I broke my wrist falling on the ice in 2019. The physical therapist said the tremor might never fully go away. I told the doctor that. He nodded and kept writing. I scored 28 out of 30 on that test. 28. I lost 2 points on the clock drawing because my hand tremor made the numbers uneven. But in this folder, there was a photocopy of a letter from that doctor's office. Assessment indicates possible early cognitive changes. Recommend follow-up evaluation and family involvement in care decisions. Possible early cognitive changes, based on a shaky clock drawn by a woman with a documented hand tremor. That's all it takes. One piece of paper with the right words, and suddenly you're not a person anymore. You're a diagnosis, a liability, a house that's just sitting there. I found the property assessment next. $485,000. There was a business card stapled to it. Sandra Price, Senior Relocation Specialist. Someone had written in pencil, "We'll accept 5% below asking for quick close." And at the very back of the folder, a glossy brochure. Sunrise Senior Living, Memory Care with Dignity. A photo of smiling elderly people doing watercolors in a bright room. One of them looked about 90, wearing a paper birthday crown. I've worked in places like that. I've seen what happens behind those glossy photos. I've held the hands of people whose children said, "It's for the best," and then never came to visit. I've cleaned up after people who forgot how to feed themselves, forgot their own names, forgot they ever had families at all. I swore to Earl the year before he died that I would never end up in a place like that. Not while I could still think. Not while I could still fight. The folder was heavy in my lap. Not from the paper, from everything it meant. 8 months of planning. 8 months of watching me, writing things down, building a case. And I didn't notice. Not once. Because when you love your children, you don't expect them to be building a trap. I should tell you about Earl. He's been gone 9 years now, but he's still everywhere in this house. His reading chair by the window, the one with the worn patch on the right arm where he'd rest his elbow while doing the crossword. His coffee mug on the shelf, the one from his job at Hensley Electric, blue with a white lightning bolt. Tanya keeps moving that mug to the back of the cabinet. "It's old," she says. "You have nicer ones." I keep moving it back. Earl and I bought this house in 1986. We'd been married 12 years by then, scraping by in a rented apartment with thin walls and a landlord who pretended not to hear when things broke. Greg was 8. I remember the day we moved in. Earl carrying boxes while I stood in the living room and cried because I couldn't believe it was real. 4 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen, with enough counter space to actually roll out pie dough. "We'll never leave," Earl said that night. We were sitting on the floor because our furniture hadn't arrived yet, eating cold pizza off paper plates. "This is it, Lorraine. This is our forever." He meant it. He paid the mortgage on time every single month for 18 years, even when it meant skipping dinners, even when it meant no vacations, even when it meant saying no to Greg about things other kids got. "The house comes first," he'd say. "The house is security. The house means nobody can tell us to leave." When he died, massive heart attack, 62 years old, right there in the backyard while he was planting tomatoes. I was 59, and the mortgage still had 11 years left on it. Everybody told me to sell. "The house is too big for one person," they said. "You'll rattle around in there alone. Better to downsize while you're still healthy." I didn't sell. I went back to work. 35 years as a nurse at Shady Grove, and I thought I was done at 60. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I was tired in ways that sleep didn't fix. But I went back. Night shifts, because they paid better. I worked until I was 67 years old, and I paid off that mortgage myself. Every penny. The day I made the last payment, I went home and sat in Earl's chair and told him, out loud, "It's done. It's ours." Forever, like you said. Nobody can tell me to leave my own house. That's what I thought. Greg was a good boy. I have to keep reminding myself of that. Because it's true, and because I need it to be true. He was sweet, sensitive, the kind of kid who brought home injured birds and cried when they died. He used to draw me pictures at school. Lopsided houses, suns with smiling faces, stick figures holding hands with MOM written underneath in big capital letters. I don't know when he changed. Maybe he didn't change. Maybe he just grew up in a world that teaches you to see people as resources, and he learned the lesson well. He met Tanya in college. She was studying business, sharp and confident and beautiful in that polished way that made me nervous from the start. I remember the first time he brought her home for Thanksgiving. She looked around the house like she was appraising it. "Great bones," she said. "You could really do something with this place." Earl didn't like her. He never said so directly. That wasn't his way. But I could tell. He'd get quiet when she talked, which was often, and he'd find excuses to go outside whenever she started asking questions about the house, the neighborhood, the property values. "She's just practical," Greg said when I mentioned it once. "She thinks about the future." The future. That word keeps coming up. They got married in 2008. Destination wedding in Cancun, because Tanya had always dreamed of a beach ceremony. Earl and I paid $40,000 for that dream. $40,000 we'd been saving for our own retirement. But Greg was our only child, and he looked at us with those eyes. The same eyes that used to beg for a puppy, a bicycle, 5 more minutes before bed. And we couldn't say no. We never could say no to him. After they got married, the requests didn't stop. They needed help with the down payment on their first house. They needed a co-signer because Greg's credit wasn't great. They needed money for Tanya's car when hers broke down. They needed help with Becca's private kindergarten because public schools just aren't safe anymore, Mom. I keep a list in my head. I know I shouldn't, but I do. $53,000, give or take, over 15 years. That's not counting the $40,000 for the wedding. That's not counting the countless dinners, the babysitting, the birthday checks, the Christmas gifts that always cost more than I could afford. And 3 years ago, $15,000 for temporary difficulties. They'd pay it back as soon as they got on their feet, they said. Just a loan between family. They haven't mentioned it since. Neither have I. Because what do you say? Where's my money? To your own son. You say nothing. You swallow it. You tell yourself that's what mothers do. Tanya started coming over more often about a year ago. Just checking in, she'd say, though she never called first. She'd walk through the rooms, opening cabinets, looking in the refrigerator, running her finger along surfaces like she was inspecting for dust. Lorraine, this yogurt is expired. Lorraine, when's the last time you cleaned behind the stove? Lorraine, are you sure you should be using a ladder at your age? She'd move things. That's the part that made me feel crazy, because it was always small enough to deny. The spices in my cabinet, I've kept them in the same order for 40 years, by how often I use them, so I can grab what I need without looking. She reorganized them alphabetically. It's more efficient, she said when I mentioned it. Efficient for who? She doesn't cook in my kitchen. She moved Earl's photo on the bedroom dresser. It's been facing the door since he died. I like to see his face when I walk in. She turned it around because the light was hitting it wrong. The window's on the other side of the room. There is no light hitting that dresser. The coffee mug. The coat hook. The way I fold my towels. Nothing was too small for her to improve. And every time I pushed back, every time I said, I like it the way it was, she'd get this look on her face. Patient. Pitying. The look you give a child who doesn't understand why she can't have cookies for dinner. Of course, Lorraine. Whatever makes you comfortable. Then she'd leave, and I'd spend the rest of the day wondering if I was being unreasonable. If maybe she was right. If maybe I was turning into one of those difficult old women who can't accept change. That's the trick of it. They make you question yourself. They make you wonder if you're the problem. I know this trick. I've seen it at Shady Grove, with families who need their elderly relatives to seem incompetent so they can take control. I just never thought I'd see it in my own kitchen. They started calling Mrs. Patterson, my next-door neighbor, known her for 30 years, just to check on Mom. June Patterson told me about it herself, embarrassed and apologetic. They asked such strange questions, she said. Did I notice anything different about you? Did you seem confused lately? Did you ever leave your doors unlocked or forget to take in your mail? What did you tell them? The truth, that you're the sharpest person on this block and you've never left your mail in the box longer than an hour. God bless June Patterson. But it made me realize they were building a case, documenting, gathering witnesses, like I was a defendant in a trial I didn't know was happening. I started noticing other things. Greg never asked my opinion about anything anymore. Not like he used to when he'd call and say, Mom, what do you think about this? Now his calls were announcements. We're coming Sunday. Not, can we come, just, we're coming. As if my schedule didn't matter. As if I was just there, waiting, like the house itself. Tanya started accompanying me to doctor's appointments. For support, she said. But she'd do all the talking. She'd answer questions the doctor asked me, cutting in before I could open my mouth. "She's been a little forgetful lately," she'd say, right in front of me. "We're a bit worried about her driving." I'm a fine driver. I've never had an accident in 53 years behind the wheel. But suddenly, every time I drove somewhere, there were comments. "Are you sure you should go alone? Maybe Greg should take you. The roads are so dangerous these days." They were shrinking my world, making it smaller, one restriction at a time, until there'd be nothing left but the house. And then they'd take that too. I just didn't realize how organized they were about it until I found that folder. That evening, the evening I found the folder, Greg and Tanya came back from wherever they'd been. They were staying in the guest room, like they always did when they visited. Like they were doing me a favor by sleeping under the roof I'd paid for. I cooked dinner. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, Earl's recipe for the meatloaf. I've been making it the same way for 40 years. Tanya picked at it like it might be poisoned. "How was your day, Mom?" she asked, and her voice was so sweet it made my teeth ache. That smile she practiced in the mirror, those eyes that never quite warmed up. "Fine," I said. "Just cleaning. You know how it is." "You really shouldn't push yourself," she said. "All that bending and reaching. At your age. At your age." She says that a lot. Like 71 is 100. Like I've got one foot in the grave and I'm just too stubborn to notice. "I manage fine," I said. Greg was quiet. He's always quiet now when Tanya's talking. He used to be such a chatterbox. That's what Earl called him. Our little chatterbox, always full of stories and questions and opinions. Now he just sat there, pushing food around his plate, checking his phone every few minutes. "Greg, honey, don't you think your mom looks tired?" Tanya said. "I've been saying she needs more rest." He looked up, barely meeting my eyes. "Yeah, maybe. You should take it easy, Mom. Take it easy," while they planned tomorrow's conversation. While they arranged to put me in a home and sell everything I've spent my life building. "I'll take it easy when I'm dead," I said. It came out sharper than I intended. Tanya's smile tightened. "Now, Lorraine, let's not be morbid." I said nothing else. I cleared the dishes and washed them by hand, even though they bought me a dishwasher last Christmas that I never wanted and barely use. The water was too hot, but I didn't turn it down. The burn felt like the only honest thing that had happened all day. When they went to bed, I heard them talking through the wall. I couldn't make out words, just the murmur of voices, the occasional high note of Tanya's laugh. Planning, probably going over their script for tomorrow. Phase 3. Final talk. Stay calm. Stay loving. If she cries, that actually helps our case. I sat in the kitchen until midnight, listening to the house settle. The creak in the floorboard by the stairs. The rattle of the window in the guest room, always meant to fix that. The tick of Earl's clock on the mantel, the one we bought on our honeymoon, still keeping perfect time after 48 years. This is my house. Every creak, every rattle, every tick. I earned it. I paid for it. I will not be carried out of it in a brochure. At 12:30, I made the first phone call. Ruth Castellano answered on the second ring, even though it was past midnight. "Who died?" was the first thing she said. That's how her mother used to answer late calls too. Rosé Castellano, a patient at Shady Grove for the last 4 years of her life. I held her hand when she passed. Ruth sent me a card afterward that said, "Thank you for treating her like a person when she'd forgotten how to be one." "Nobody died," I said. "Not yet. But I think someone's trying to bury me alive." I told her everything. The folder, the timeline, the emails, the cognitive test. Ruth didn't interrupt. She was a lawyer, elder law, ironically, and she knew how to listen. When I finished, she let out a long breath. "Lorraine, can you photograph every page of that folder? Tonight? Before they wake up?" "Already did." I'd spent an hour with my phone, hand shaking from more than just the tremor, capturing every word they'd written about me. "Good. Send them to me, and don't let on that you know. Act normal tomorrow morning, whatever normal looks like. They're planning something called a final talk for tomorrow afternoon. Then I'll be there at noon, with paperwork." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly. It was too early for relief. But something. Like the first breath after holding your head underwater. "Ruth, I can't pay you much. My pension—" "Stop," she said. "Your mother taught me what decent human beings look like when I was 26 and thought the world was all about billable hours. You took care of her when I couldn't. Whatever this costs, we'll figure it out. But tonight, you send me those photos. And you get some sleep." Sleep, as if that was possible. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when your son remembers which side of the law he's supposed to be on." She hung up. I stared at the phone for a while, feeling its weight in my hand. Then I made the second call. "Harriet Donovan and I have been friends for 37 years, since our sons were in Little League together, and we bonded over bad coffee in the bleachers. She's 74 now, widowed like me, living alone in a condo about 15 minutes away. We used to see each other every week. I haven't seen her in 3 months. Every time I tried to make plans, something came up. Greg needed me to babysit. Tanya had scheduled an appointment I forgot about. There was a family dinner that absolutely couldn't be moved. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just a busy stretch. I didn't see the pattern. Now I saw it. "Harriet," I said when she answered, "I need you to come to my house tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Don't tell me you're busy. You're not busy." She was quiet for a beat. Harriet has known me long enough to hear the difference between a request and a command. "Lorraine, what happened?" "I can't explain right now. I just need you there. As a witness." "A witness to what?" "I'm not entirely sure yet. But I need someone in that room who's known me longer than my own son seems to remember. Can you do that?" Another pause. "I'll be there at 2:30. 3 is fine." 2:30, she said. "I want time to look you in the eye and make sure you're not falling apart." That's Harriet. Bossy as ever. I've never been more grateful for it. "Thank you. You're scaring me a little, Lorraine." "Good," I said. "I'm a little scared too." The third call was the simplest. Automated bank line, punching in account numbers I've known by heart since Earl opened them in 1982. I listened to the robot voice read back my balances. Savings, $127,342. Checking, $4,891. No outstanding debts. No liens on the property. They hadn't gotten there yet. Whatever they were planning, it hadn't included accessing my accounts. Maybe that was coming. Maybe that's why the attorney's email mentioned guardianship options. Guardianship. The word made me sick. I've seen guardianship cases at Shady Grove. I've seen what happens when an elderly person gets deemed incompetent and a family member takes control. Bank accounts drained, houses sold, inheritance divided before the body is cold. All legal, all tidy, all wrapped up in language about best interests and appropriate care. My money was still my money. My house was still my house. But for how long? I wrote down the balances on a piece of paper and tucked it into my underwear drawer, behind the old jewelry box with Earl's wedding ring. Tanya cleaned everywhere else, but she hadn't found her way into that drawer yet. Then I sat in the living room until dawn, not sleeping, just thinking, remembering, making a plan of my own. The thing about getting old is that people start treating you like you've lost your mind long before you actually lose anything. They speak louder, even though your hearing is fine. They explain simple things slowly, like you've forgotten how door handles work. They make decisions for you because asking takes too long, and you might give the wrong answer anyway. I've watched it happen to other people all my life. The fade, I used to call it. The slow disappearing of a person in the eyes of those around them. I never thought I'd feel it happening to me. It started small. Greg stopped asking my opinion about things. What to do for Christmas, where to eat for his birthday, whether Becca should take piano lessons. He'd just announce decisions, and I'd find out along with everyone else. Then Tanya started finishing my sentences. Not because I was struggling to find words, but because she was impatient. I'd start to say something, and she'd jump in. What Lorraine means is, as if I needed a translator for my own thoughts. The doctor visits were the worst. Tanya would list my symptoms, tiredness, forgetfulness, confusion, while I sat there like a piece of furniture. When I tried to correct her, she'd pat my hand and say, "It's okay, Lorraine. It's hard to notice these things in ourselves." Hard to notice. Like I was too far gone to be trusted with my own experience. The folder made it clear. This wasn't concern. This was strategy. Every, "Are you sure you should be driving?" was a building block. Every, "You seem tired, Mom," was a brick in the wall they were building around me. And the worst part? It almost worked. There were nights I lay awake wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was slipping. Maybe I couldn't see it. Maybe that's what happened. You lost yourself so slowly, you didn't notice until you were already gone. But then I'd remember. 28 out of 30. A shaky clock and 2 wrong answers, and suddenly I'm a candidate for a memory care unit. I didn't lose my mind. They were trying to take it. Morning came too bright and too early. I heard Greg and Tanya moving around upstairs. Shower running, drawers opening and closing, the murmur of conversation I couldn't quite make out. I was already in the kitchen when they came down. "Mom, you're up early." Greg's voice was cautious. "Couldn't sleep." "I'm always up by 6. You'd know that if you paid attention." His face flinched just slightly. Good. Let him wonder what I meant by that. Tanya poured herself coffee from the pot I'd already made. She didn't thank me. "We were thinking," she said, "maybe we could all have a little talk this afternoon, just the 3 of us, about some things we've been wanting to discuss." Phase 3. Right on schedule. "What things?" I asked, playing dumb. Playing the role they'd written for me. "Just family stuff," Greg said. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Options. For the future. Options." That's what the folder said. Present options as choices she's making herself. Emphasize safety, not finance. "That sounds fine," I said. "What time were you thinking?" They exchanged a glance. Tanya's eyebrows lifted slightly. Surprised, maybe, that I wasn't putting up a fight. "Around 3, she said. After lunch? 3 o'clock. Ruth would be here at noon. Harriet at 2:30. 3 works for me, I said. I'm not going anywhere. That was the truth, at least. I wasn't going anywhere. I made them breakfast like nothing was wrong. Eggs, bacon, toast. Greg's favorite from when he was a kid. He ate quietly, avoiding my eyes. Tanya scrolled through her phone between bites, probably reviewing the script. After they left to run some errands, getting their ducks in a row, I imagined, I cleaned up the dishes and sat down to wait. The house was quiet. Earl's clock ticked on the mantel. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the block. I thought about my mother. She died young, only 63, but she was sharp as a tack until the very end. Cancer took her body, but her mind stayed clear. I remember her last words to me. Don't let them put you in a box before you're dead, Lorraine. Not a nursing home box. Not a nice old lady box. Not any box. You fight for every inch of yourself. I was 42 then. I thought I understood what she meant. I didn't. Not until now. The doorbell rang at 11:47. Ruth Castellano stood on my porch, looking exactly like I remembered. Small, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, with a briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly pension. But she hugged me first, before anything else. That's who Ruth is. Tell me everything again, she said when we sat down. Every detail. I need to hear it from you, not just see it in pictures. So I told her. The folder, the timeline, the emails, the cognitive test, and the doctor's letter, the property assessment and the realtor's card, the brochure for Sunrise Senior Living with its watercolor classes and paper birthday crowns. Ruth took notes. She asked questions. She looked at the photos on my phone and made me send them to her again, just to be safe. Here's the situation, she said when I finished. They can't force you out of your own home. You're mentally competent. And I don't care what that doctor wrote. A 28 out of 30 is not evidence of cognitive decline, especially with a documented hand tremor. But if they get guardianship, that changes. A guardian can make decisions about your living situation, your finances, your medical care. They can sell your house right out from under you. How do I stop them? You stay competent. You get a second opinion on that cognitive test. I know a neurologist, independent, owes me a favor. And you revoke whatever power of attorney you've given Greg. My stomach dropped. I gave him limited power of attorney 5 years ago, just for bills, for emergencies. Ruth nodded slowly. Let me guess. Just in case something happens, Mom. And you trusted him, so you didn't read the fine print. I hadn't read the fine print. I trusted him. He was my son. Depending on how it's worded, Ruth said, he might have more authority than you realize, but either way you can revoke it. I have the paperwork. You sign today, I file tomorrow. It's done. That simple? That simple. As long as you're competent to sign, and you are, Lorraine, don't let anyone tell you different. Your decisions are your own. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out several documents. A revocation of power of attorney, a new will, a statement of capacity for me to sign in front of a notary. I brought a notary, she added. He's waiting in the car. I thought you might want to get this done before the final talk. I looked at the papers. My hands were shaking. The tremor again, worse when I'm stressed. But my mind was perfectly clear. What about the new will? What's different? Your house and assets go into a trust. Greg can still inherit, but only after your death and only if he doesn't contest your decisions while you're alive. If he tries to challenge your capacity or force a sale, he gets nothing. It all goes to charity. That's harsh. It's protective. There's a difference. She met my eyes. Lorraine, I don't know if your son is a bad person. I don't know if this is all his wife's idea, or if he's in on it, or if he's just weak. But I know what that folder says. And I know what happens when families get away with this. I've seen it. So have I said quietly. 35 years at Shady Grove. Then you know. You sign these papers, and you take back control. What you do with that control, whether you forgive him, cut him off, or something in between, that's your choice. But right now, you need to make sure it stays your choice. I picked up the pen. The notary was a quiet young man named David, with round glasses and the careful movements of someone who understood he was witnessing something important. He didn't ask questions, just checked my ID, watched me sign each document, and stamped everything with crisp efficiency. When it was done, Ruth tucked the papers back into her briefcase. I'll file the revocation first thing tomorrow, but as of this moment, legally, Greg has no power of attorney over you anymore. Whatever authority he thought he had is gone. I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but something, like taking off a coat I hadn't realized was weighing me down. Now, Ruth said, about this afternoon. What do you want to happen? I'd been thinking about that all night. I want them to know I know, but I want them to show their hand first. Let them do their final talk. Let them bring out the brochures and the practiced concern. And then I want them to understand exactly how wrong they were. Ruth smiled, a small, fierce smile that made her look like her mother. Can I stay? I was hoping you would. Good. And this friend of yours, Harriet? She'll be here at 2:30. She's known me since Greg was 8 years old. If he tries to claim I'm not myself, she'll set him straight. Perfect. Ruth stood up. I'm going to step out for a bit, let you catch your breath. I'll be back at 2. And Lorraine? Yes? You're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know this hurts in ways you probably can't even name yet. But you're protecting yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival. She squeezed my hand and left. I sat alone in the living room, listening to the clock tick. Earl's clock, counting out the seconds until my son tried to put me in a box. Harriet arrived at 2:25, 5 minutes early, as promised. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug without saying a word. That's the thing about old friends. They don't need explanations. They just know. You look like hell, she said when she pulled back. Thank you, Harriet. Always a pleasure. I mean it. When's the last time you slept? What day is it? She shook her head. Sit down. I'll make tea. And then you're going to tell me what's going on, because your message last night scared me half to death. I told her. Not everything. Some of it was too raw, too recent. But enough. The folder. The plan. The final talk, scheduled for today. Harriet's face went through several colors while she listened. By the end, she was gripping her teacup so hard I thought it might crack. Those little snakes, she said. After everything you've done for them. That's what I said. Internally. Lorraine, I knew something was wrong. I've barely seen you in months. Every time I called, there was some reason you couldn't get together. I thought maybe... I don't know. I thought maybe you were pulling away. They were keeping me away. I didn't even realize it until now. The isolation thing. I've read about this. It's what abusers do. Cut you off from your support system so there's no one to notice when they make their move. I hadn't thought of it that way. Abusers. It seemed too strong a word for my own son. But then I thought about the folder, the emails, the brochure with the paper birthday crown. What would I call it if it was happening to someone else? The lawyer's coming back at 2, I said. She helped me revoke Greg's power of attorney this morning. He doesn't know yet. Harriet's eyebrows went up. Ruth Castellano? You know her? I know of her. She's got a reputation. People say she's a pit bull in a pantsuit. Her mother was a patient of mine, lovely woman. Ruth's doing this as a favor. Some favor. Harriet shook her head. Lorraine, what happens when Greg finds out? When they do their little talk and realize you've already outmaneuvered them? That was the question, wasn't it? I'd been trying not to think about it. I don't know, I admitted. I guess we're about to find out. Ruth returned at 2 sharp. She and Harriet sized each other up for about 30 seconds before deciding they approved of each other. I could see it in the way their shoulders relaxed, the way they both reached for the same chair, and then laughed about it. So, Ruth said, settling into Earl's chair, with my permission, not that she asked. The plan is to let them make their pitch first. They don't know you found the folder. They don't know I'm here. They probably don't know Harriet's here either. They know I'm a friend, Harriet said, but they think I'm just some little old lady who plays bridge. Perfect. Let them underestimate you. Let them underestimate all of us. And then? I asked. And then, Ruth said, we show them what underestimation costs. The doorbell rang at 3:04, 4 minutes late. I wondered if they'd been psyching themselves up in the car, reviewing the script one more time. I answered the door. Greg stood there with Tanya, both of them arranged in expressions of concerned affection. But there was someone else too, a woman I didn't recognize, blonde, professional, holding a leather folder. Mom, Greg said, this is Sandra Price. She helps families with transitions. We thought it might be useful to have her here. Sandra Price, the name on the business card in the folder. Senior Relocation Specialist. They'd brought backup. Come in, I said, stepping aside. All of you. The living room felt smaller with 5 people in it. Ruth was in Earl's chair, Harriet on the sofa, and now Greg, Tanya, and Sandra were standing in the middle of the room, looking confused by the unexpected audience. Mom, Greg said slowly. Who are these people? This is Harriet. You remember Harriet. You used to call her Aunt Harry when you were little. Greg's face twitched. Of course. Hi, Mrs. Donovan. Hello, Greg. You look thin. Tanya not feeding you? Tanya's smile went rigid. Harriet, what a surprise. And this, I continued, is Ruth Castellano. She's an attorney, specializes in elder law. The color drained from Greg's face. Sandra Price looked between us all, clearly trying to recalibrate. I'm sorry, Sandra said. I think there might be some confusion. I'm here to help facilitate a family conversation about Lorraine's care options. I know why you're here, I said. Please sit down. Let's have that conversation. They sat. What else could they do? Sandra took the armchair by the window. Greg and Tanya perched on the love seat, closer together than they usually sat, like they were trying to present a united front. Ruth stayed quiet. So did Harriet. They were here as witnesses, as backup. But this was my show. So, I said, you wanted to talk about options. Tanya recovered first. She always does. Lorraine, this isn't what it looks like. We're just worried about you, living alone in this big house at your age. We think it might be time to consider some alternatives. Alternatives? Places where you'd have help, Greg said. His voice was strained, almost pleading. People to check on you. Activities. You'd make friends. I have friends, I gestured to Harriet. Funny how I stopped seeing them around the time you started planning this. Greg's face went pale. Planning what? Would you like to tell them, or should I? Silence. Tanya's eyes darted to the hallway, then back to me. Last night, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was cleaning the guest room. I found a folder behind your old desk, Greg. A blue folder. Labeled Mom's House, Action Plan. The air in the room changed. I could feel it. The way everyone went still, the way Greg's hand found Tanya's and held on. I read it, I continued. All of it. The timeline of my incidents. The phases of your plan. The emails with the attorney about guardianship. The property assessment. The brochure for Sunrise Senior Living. Sandra Price's face was a study in controlled horror. I had no idea. You had a business card in that folder, I said, with a note about taking 5% below, asking Price for a quick close. So, you knew something. She didn't respond. What could she say? Greg. I turned to my son. Look at me. He did. After a long moment, he lifted his eyes to mine, and I saw the boy I'd raised. Still in there, somewhere, under the fear and the guilt and whatever else had led him to this moment. Did you write that folder? His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Mom, Did you write it? Parts of it. Tanya helped. We were trying to figure out the best way to approach this. You get so upset when we try to talk about serious things. The best approach? Documenting my mistakes like evidence? Scheduling a cognitive test without telling me what it was for? Emailing attorneys about guardianship? We were covering our bases. Tanya's voice was sharp now, the honey gone. In case you reacted badly, we have to protect ourselves. Protect yourselves from what? From me saying no? From you making a bad decision because you're too stubborn to admit you need help. The room went very quiet. Harriet made a sound low in her throat. Ruth leaned back in her chair, watching. I'm stubborn, I said slowly. That's true. I've been stubborn my whole life. Stubborn enough to work double shifts for 8 years to pay off this house after your father died. Stubborn enough to raise you by myself when things were hard. Stubborn enough to say yes every time you needed money, even when I couldn't afford it. Mom, I'm not finished. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. I paid for your wedding. I co-signed your mortgage. I gave you $15,000 you never paid back and never mentioned again. I watched you spend money you didn't have on things you didn't need, and I said nothing, because you're my son, and I love you, and I wanted to believe you'd figure it out. Greg's eyes were wet now. Good. Let him feel something. And this is how you repay me? By waiting for me to die so you can take my house? By building a case to have me declared incompetent? By bringing a realtor to my living room to help with my transition? It wasn't like that, he said. We were worried. You were greedy. The word landed like a slap. I don't know if it started that way, but that's what it became. You looked at this house. My house. The house I paid for. The house your father and I built a life in. And you saw dollar signs. You saw your inheritance sitting there unused, and you decided you didn't want to wait. Tanya started to speak, but Ruth cut her off. I think, Ruth said calmly. It might be time to clarify some things. Mrs. Price, you can go. Whatever arrangement you had with the Barkers is no longer relevant. Sandra stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. I apologize for any misunderstanding, she said to no one in particular, and practically ran for the door. When she was gone, Ruth turned to Greg and Tanya. This morning, your mother revoked the power of attorney she previously granted to Greg. The paperwork is already being processed. He no longer has any legal authority over her affairs. Tanya's face went white. She can't do that. She can, and she did. She's a competent adult. The cognitive test you've been citing as evidence? 28 out of 30, with 2 points lost due to a documented hand tremor. That's not cognitive decline. That's a tremor affecting fine motor skills. Any judge would throw out a guardianship petition based on that alone. We weren't going to, Greg started. The emails suggest otherwise. Ruth pulled out her phone, read from the screen. If she resists, we can petition for guardianship. That's what you wrote to Howard Fitch. Was that a joke? Greg said nothing. Your mother has also revised her will, Ruth continued. Her assets will go into a trust. You can still inherit, but only after her death, and only if you don't challenge her decisions while she's alive. If you try to force a sale, file for guardianship, or otherwise interfere with her autonomy, you forfeit your inheritance entirely. That's not fair, Tanya said. We're family. Family, I said, and the word tasted strange in my mouth. Family doesn't write action plans. Family doesn't document incidents and call them early signs. Family doesn't look at their mother and see a house they can sell. We made mistakes, Greg said. His voice cracked. But we're still your family. You're still my son, I said. That hasn't changed, but my trust in you, that's gone. And you did that. Not me. You. The room was quiet for a long moment. Harriet reached over and squeezed my hand. Ruth sat perfectly still, watching Greg and Tanya like a hawk watches mice. Finally, Greg stood up. His shoulders were slumped, his face gray. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. I don't know what to say, he said. Then don't say anything. Go home. Think about what you did and why you did it. And when you're ready to have an honest conversation, not a scripted talk designed to make me feel crazy, you can call me. What if you don't answer? Then I don't answer. That's my choice now, Greg. Mine. Not yours. He looked at Tanya. She was still sitting on the love seat, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go. Tanya stood up slowly. She looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Hard, cold, calculating. You're making a mistake, Lorraine. Maybe, but at least it's my mistake to make. They left without another word. The front door closed behind them with a soft click, and then it was just me, Harriet, and Ruth in the sudden silence. Well, Harriet said after a moment, that was something. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking. Really shaking now, worse than the tremor ever gets. I looked down at them, these old hands that had held my son when he was born, changed his diapers, wiped his tears, signed over thousands of dollars to help him when he needed it. Is it over? I asked. Ruth shook her head. Not quite. There's one more thing in that folder you should know about. My stomach dropped. What? She pulled out her phone again, scrolled to something, handed it to me. I did some digging while I was waiting in the car earlier. Your son opened a credit line 3 months ago. $50,000, using your home as collateral. I stared at the screen. The numbers didn't make sense. That's not possible. I never signed anything. It was an electronic signature, processed from an IP address that traces back to Greg's house, not yours. He forged your signature, Lorraine. That's fraud. The world tilted slightly. I gripped the arm of my chair. What do I do? You have options. You can report it, which would likely result in criminal charges. You can confront him privately and demand he pay it back. Or you can let it go and hope he uses the money for something worthwhile. Criminal charges against my own son. Against someone who forged your signature and put a lien on your house. The fact that he's your son doesn't change what he did. I looked at the phone in my hand. $50,000. On top of everything else he'd done. I thought about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I thought about early signs of cognitive decline and if she resists. I thought about Sandra Price with her quick close and her 5% below asking. Can I think about it? Of course, but don't think too long. The credit line has a 6-month draw period. After that, payments start coming due, and they'll come out of your equity whether you authorize them or not. I understand. Ruth stood up, gathered her things. I'll be in touch tomorrow about the paperwork. And Lorraine? Yes? You did the right thing today. I know it doesn't feel like it. But you stood up for yourself when most people would have folded. That's not nothing. She left. Harriet stayed. We sat together for a long time, not talking, just existing in the same space. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, painting long shadows across the floor. Earl's clock ticked on the mantel, steady as ever. You want to know something funny? I said eventually. What's that? I always thought the hardest part of getting old would be the body. The aches and pains, the things that stop working. But it's not that. It's watching people decide you're not a person anymore. It's seeing yourself disappear in their eyes. Harriet nodded slowly. I know exactly what you mean. You do? My daughter-in-law, you've met her, the one with the opinions about everything. She talks about me in the third person when I'm in the room. Has Harriet eaten? Does Harriet need to use the bathroom? Like I'm a pet or a problem. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me about Greg? We looked at each other. Two old women in a quiet house, both of us carrying weights we hadn't known how to share. We need to do better, I said. At what? At talking. At telling each other the truth. At not letting them isolate us. Harriet reached over and squeezed my hand again. Deal. That night, after Harriet left, I walked through my house room by room. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals. The living room where Earl used to watch football and yell at the television. The bedroom where we'd slept for 37 years, where he'd died in my arms one quiet morning while the birds sang outside. They wanted to take this from me, not because I couldn't live here, not because I was a danger to myself, because it was worth money, and they wanted the money, and I was in the way. I stood by the window in the guest room, Greg's old room, and looked out at the backyard. The oak tree was huge now, branches spreading wide enough to shade half the yard. We planted it the year Greg was born. I remember Earl digging the hole, sweating in the summer heat, saying, "This tree will outlive all of us." He was probably right. I went to the dresser where I kept Earl's photograph. It was facing the door where it belonged. I touched the glass, traced the outline of his face. I didn't let them, I said quietly. I held on. Like you always told me to. The photo didn't answer, of course. Photos never do. But I felt something. A warmth, maybe, or just the memory of warmth. And that was enough. A week passed. Then 2. Greg didn't call. I didn't call him either. Sometimes that's how it has to be. You stand your ground and wait to see who's willing to cross the distance. Ruth filed all the paperwork. The power of attorney was officially revoked. The new will was in place. And after some back and forth, I decided not to report the forged credit line. Not yet, anyway. Instead, Ruth sent Greg a letter explaining that I knew about the fraud and expected him to pay back the $50,000 over the next 2 years. If he didn't, I'd go to the police. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even mercy, really. It was a test to see if he cared more about making things right or getting away with what he'd done. I got my cognitive assessment redone. Ruth's neurologist friend, a woman named Dr. Patel, who treated me like a human being instead of a set of symptoms. The results? Normal cognitive function for my age. The hand tremor was just a hand tremor. You're sharp as a tack, she said. Don't let anyone tell you different. I kept the report in the same drawer as Earl's wedding ring, just in case I ever needed proof. Becca came to visit in the 3rd week. She showed up alone, without telling her parents, the way teenagers do when they want to make a statement. "Grandma," she said, standing in my doorway, "Mom and Dad are acting weird. They won't talk about you. Every time I mention your name, they change the subject. Come in, honey. I'll make tea." We sat in the kitchen, the same table where I'd found the folder, where I'd read about Phase 1 and Phase 2 and Phase 3. It looked different in the afternoon light, with Becca across from me, her face so young and serious. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Dad said he said you weren't yourself. What do you think?" She looked at me carefully, the way only teenagers can look, seeing everything, judging everything, deciding in real time whether you're worth believing. "You seem fine to me," she said. "You seem the same as always." "That's because I am the same. Your father made some choices I don't agree with. We're working through it. But I'm not sick, Becca. I'm not losing my mind. And I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly. "Mom keeps talking about the house, about how it's too big for one person, how it's a waste of space. I told her it's your house. You can do what you want with it. She didn't like that." "I bet she didn't. Is that why you're fighting?" "Because of the house?" I thought about how to answer. Becca was 16, old enough for some truths, too young for others. "Partly," I said. "But it's more than that. It's about respect, about whether they see me as a person who gets to make her own choices or as a problem they need to solve. And they need to decide which one I am. I already know." Becca was quiet for a moment, turning her teacup in her hands. "I don't want you to go to one of those places," she said softly. "The ones with the old people in wheelchairs staring at nothing. You're not like that." "No, I'm not." "Promise me you won't let them put you somewhere like that." "I promise," I said. "As long as I have breath in my body, I decide where I live. Not them. Not anyone." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Good," she said, "because I need you here. You're the only one who doesn't treat me like a kid." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "That's because you're not a kid. You're a young woman with a good head on her shoulders. Don't let anyone tell you different. Now you sound like yourself." I am myself. That's the whole point. A month after the confrontation, Greg finally called. I almost didn't answer. My hand hovered over the phone for 3 rings. 4, 5. Then I picked up. Mom? His voice was tentative, the way it used to be when he was young and knew he'd done something wrong. I'm here. I want to talk. Not on the phone. In person. Just the two of us. No Tanya. Why should I? Silence. Then, because I've been thinking about what you said, about what I did, and I don't like the person I was in that room. I let the silence stretch. Outside, a car drove by. A dog barked. Life went on. Come tomorrow, I said finally. 2:00. And Greg? Yes? Don't lie to me, not anymore. If you can't be honest, don't come at all. I understand. I hung up. My hand was shaking again, but not from the tremor. From something else entirely. He showed up at 1:55, 5 minutes early. That was new. Greg was always late to everything. It drove Earl crazy when he was alive, and it drove me crazy after. 5 minutes early meant something. I let him in. He looked different. Thinner, darker circles under his eyes. Like he hadn't been sleeping either. We sat in the living room, the same room where everything had happened. I didn't offer tea. This wasn't a social call. Talk, I said. He took a deep breath. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth. That's all I'm asking for. Another breath. His hands were clenched in his lap, knuckles white. It started with Tanya, he said slowly. She's been worried about money for a while. We both have. Her job's not as stable as she lets on, and my salary hasn't gone up in 3 years, and the mortgage and Becca's school and everything else. We've been drowning, Mom. For years. We just didn't tell you. You could have told me. And asked you for more money after everything you'd already given us? He shook his head. I was ashamed. Tanya said we needed to be self-sufficient. She said we couldn't keep coming to you every time we had a problem. So instead of asking for help, you decided to take my house. He flinched. It wasn't supposed to be like that. In the beginning, it was just, we were just talking. About the future. About what would happen when you couldn't live alone anymore. Tanya said we should have a plan. She said other families got caught off guard by these things and ended up in court battles and nursing home debt. She said we needed to be proactive. Proactive. That's one word for it. I know how it looks. I know what those documents look like. But in my head, it was different. I told myself we were protecting you, making sure you'd be taken care of when the time came. By documenting my incidents? By scheduling a cognitive test without telling me what it was for? Tanya said, I don't care what Tanya said. My voice came out louder than I intended. I care what you thought, Greg. What you believed. Did you actually think I was losing my mind? Or did you just want it to be true because it made things easier? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. Maybe both. I saw what I wanted to see. You forgetting things, getting confused. It was convenient. Because if you were declining, then we were just helping. We were the good guys, taking care of our elderly mother. But if you were fine, he swallowed hard. If you were fine, then we were just greedy. And I couldn't face that. And now I have to face it. Because you made me, and I hate it, Mom. I hate what I see when I look in the mirror. But I needed to see it. The clock ticked. The house breathed around us. The credit line, I said. The $50,000. Was that Tanya's idea too? His face crumpled. No, that was me. We needed the money. We were about to miss a mortgage payment, and Tanya's parents were asking questions, and I panicked. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed.
I thought you'd never know. You forged my signature. I know. That's a crime, Greg. You could go to prison. I know. And you did it anyway. I wasn't thinking. I was desperate. It's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I'm just trying to explain. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd trusted, the stranger who'd betrayed me. He was all of those people at once, and I didn't know which one was real anymore. What do you want from me, Greg? I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe? A chance to make things right? I can't forgive you yet. Not now. Maybe not ever. What you did, it's not just about money or the house. You looked at me and saw someone to manage, someone to move around like furniture. You made plans about my life without asking me, without including me, like I was already dead. That's not something you forgive overnight. Then what can I do? I thought about it. Thought about all the years between us, all the love and disappointment and hope and pain. Pay back the money, I said finally. Every cent. Ruth worked out a payment plan. Stick to it. And if you ever try something like this again, I will prosecute. You understand? Yes. Come see me. Not because you want something, but because you miss me. Call me. Talk to me like a person, not a problem. Let me see my granddaughter without Tanya monitoring every conversation. Tanya won't like that. I don't care what Tanya likes. This is between you and me. And Greg? Yes? Do something about your marriage. I don't know if you're unhappy or just weak, but whatever's wrong there, it's poisoning everything else. Figure it out. He nodded slowly. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. Is there any chance that things can go back to the way they were? No, I said, and I meant it. The way they were is gone. But maybe we can build something new, something more honest, if you're willing to do the work. I'm willing. Then we'll see. That's all I can promise right now. We'll see. He left an hour later, after we'd talked ourselves dry. I stood on the porch and watched him drive away, his car disappearing around the corner, leaving me alone with my house and my thoughts and my stubborn, steady heart. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a start. A crack in the wall where light might eventually get through. I went back inside and sat in Earl's chair. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, catching the dust motes floating in the air. I thought about everything that had happened. The folder, the confrontation, the lawyers and documents and angry words. I thought about how close I'd come to losing it all. And I thought about what comes next. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes from saying no. Not a defiant no, not an angry no, just a simple, clear boundary. This is mine. You can't have it. I decide. I'd spent so much of my life saying yes. Yes to overtime shifts. Yes to loans I couldn't afford. Yes to things that cost me more than they gave, because saying yes was easier than disappointing people. But saying no, really meaning it, really holding the line, that was something else entirely. That was power. Not the power to control others, but the power to control yourself. To choose your own life instead of letting other people choose it for you. I was 71 years old, and I was finally learning what that meant. 6 months passed.
then a year. Greg made his payments on time, every month, without fail. He started calling more often, asking about my day instead of just announcing things. Becca visited regularly, sometimes bringing homework she wanted help with, sometimes just wanting to sit in the backyard and talk about nothing. Tanya stayed distant, which was fine with me. Some relationships aren't worth fixing. Some people show you who they are, and the kindest thing you can do is believe them. Ruth stopped by occasionally for tea, updating me on the legal side of things, making sure no new surprises were lurking in the paperwork. Harriet and I started our weekly dinners again, Thursdays, at the little Italian place downtown that still made bread the old-fashioned way. Life got smaller in some ways, larger in others. I couldn't do everything I used to do. The body makes its own rules eventually. But I found new rhythms. Morning walks to the end of the block and back. Afternoons in the garden, pulling weeds, talking to Earl the way I always had. Evenings reading or watching old movies, wrapped in the quiet of a house that knew me as well as I knew it. I thought about the folder sometimes, about Phase 1 and Phase 2 and Phase 3, about all the careful planning that had gone into taking my life away from me. It still made me angry if I let it, but mostly it made me grateful. Grateful that I'd found it when I did. Grateful that I'd had the sense to fight back. Grateful that my son was, at his core, someone who could still recognize when he was wrong. Not everyone gets that. Not everyone has a second chance. It's been almost 2 years now since that afternoon. I turned 73 last month. Becca baked me a cake that was slightly lopsided and absolutely delicious. Greg came alone. Tanya was busy, which we both understood meant she'd chosen not to come, and neither of us minded. We sat on the back porch, the three of us, watching the sun go down. The oak tree cast long shadows across the yard, its branches swaying in a breeze I could barely feel. Somewhere, a neighbor was grilling, and the smell of charcoal drifted over the fence like a memory of every summer I'd ever lived through. "I'm sorry, Mom," Greg said, out of nowhere. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the tree, at the sky, at anything but my face. "You've said that before." "I know, but I mean it differently now." He finally turned to look at me. "I mean, I'm sorry I didn't see you. For years. I saw someone to manage, someone to worry about, someone to plan around. I didn't see you, and I should have." I let the words settle. They weren't perfect. Apologies never are. But they were real. I could feel the weight of them, the effort it took to say them. "I see you now," he added. "That's what I'm trying to say. I see you." I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's all I ever wanted. We stayed like that for a while, just sitting, just being. Becca got up eventually to chase a firefly across the yard, her laughter floating back to us on the evening air. Greg's hand stayed in mine, warm and steady. Not fixed, but healing. Here's what I know now, at 73, that I didn't know at 71. You are not obligated to disappear. Not for your children, not for your family, not for anyone. Your life belongs to you until the very last breath, and anyone who tries to take it before then is a thief, no matter what they tell themselves about concern or best interests. Pay attention to the small things, the moving of photographs, the reorganizing of cabinets, the casual questions about whether you're really up to doing something you've done for 50 years. These are not innocent. These are tests. They're seeing what you'll accept, how much you'll let slide, and once you start letting things slide, it gets harder and harder to find your footing again. Document everything. I know that sounds paranoid, but paranoia has its place when people are planning your future without your consent. Keep copies of your bank statements, your medical records, your legal documents. Know what you have. Know who has access to it. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Have people outside your family who see you, who check on you, who will tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear. Harriet saved my life, in a way. Not by doing anything dramatic, but just by being someone who knew me as myself, not as someone's mother or someone's problem. And most importantly, don't wait. If you find the folder, if you hear the conversations, if you see the signs, act. Act now. Act immediately. Because the people making those plans are counting on your hesitation, your love, your willingness to believe the best. They're counting on you to be a good mother, a good grandmother, a good sport. And while you're busy being good, they're taking everything you have. I found my son's folder one day before phase 3. One day. If I'd found it one day later, I would have walked into that talk unprepared. They would have had their script and their realtor and their concerned faces. And maybe I would have believed them. Maybe I would have thought I was crazy after all. Maybe I would have signed whatever they put in front of me and woken up a month later in a room that smelled like disinfectant, wondering how I got there. One day. That's all it was. One day and a vacuum cleaner and a folder that slipped behind a desk. I'm writing this from my living room. Earl's clock is ticking on the mantel, same as always. The afternoon light is coming through the windows, touching the same furniture it's touched for 37 years. Outside, the oak tree is still growing, still reaching for the sky. This is my house, my life, my choice. I almost lost it. But I didn't. And if you're reading this, if any of this sounds familiar, if any of it makes your stomach turn because you've seen the signs in your own life, then please, listen to me. Don't wait. Don't hope they'll change. Don't tell yourself it's probably nothing. Find out what they're planning. Find out now. And then decide, really decide, for yourself, with your own mind and your own voice, what you're going to do about it. Because once they take your choices away, getting them back is nearly impossible. But as long as you still have them, as long as you can still think and speak and act on your own behalf, you have more power than they want you to believe. Use it before someone uses it against you. And if you've been through something like this, if you found the folder, heard the conversations, saw the walls closing in, tell someone. Tell me. Write it down, share it, let other people know they're not alone and they're not crazy. We spend our whole lives being told to be nice, be quiet, don't make waves, don't be a burden. And then we're surprised when our own children treat us like furniture to be moved when convenient. No more. We matter. Our voices matter. Our choices matter. Say it with me. This is my life. Nobody takes it from me. Now, has this happened to you? Have you found the folder, the plan, the whispered conversations that stop when you enter the room? I want to hear your story. I need to hear it. Because the more of us who speak up, the harder it becomes for them to pretend this is normal. Write it down. Share it below. Let's break the silence together. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 73 years, it's this. Silence protects the people who hurt us. Words protect us from them. And every story shared is one more woman who might see the signs before it's too late. I found the folder. I made the calls. I kept my house. Now it's your turn.
Lorraine didn't just keep her house. She showed her son that she's the one in charge of her life, not him. Thanks for hanging out with me. You guys are amazing. You know, looking at this, it's wild how some kids think their parents are just furniture once they hit 70. Lorraine's background in nursing homes was her secret weapon. She knew exactly what calls to make. Personally, I think her cold silence was the most savage part. No shouting, just results. Do you think she should have kicked him out of her life completely, or was keeping the house enough? Hit that like button if you're on Team Lorraine. See you in the next one.